Hi, this is StrategyCast, where smart marketers and bold business thinkers share the plays behind brand breakthroughs. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications. Growth just doesn't happen. It's engineered through clear strategy, intentional brand design, and leadership that knows how to scale. My guest today, Jill MacRae, has built and led growth initiatives for some of the world's most recognizable brands, including Spanx, Starbucks, and Dunkin' Donuts. She now helps companies build sustainable, scalable growth models through her consulting firm, Jill MacRae Group. We're going to explore how to build brand scalability from the inside out and what makes it work, what breaks it, and how leaders can sustain it over time.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to the show, Jill.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, like that bio is outrageously amazing. Before we really dive in today, tell us a little bit more about your journey and really, these awesome brands that you've worked with. Tell us a little bit about how you got started with some of them as well.
Well, after being a spectacular disappointment to my family and not going to law school by following a boy to Miami, I wanted to be a chef, believe it or not. And this was back in the day before there were celebrity chefs. And I got a job at a hotel on Miami Beach, but they didn't have any openings and I had no experience. So I actually got a job in the golf shop. And within a year, I was the head buyer for all golf, tennis, and fitness apparel.
Fun.
Which was amazing. And believe it or not, working with that and the leadership in that resort sort of set me on a path to other things, working in retail, understanding how to gain customers and clients. And from there, went to Planet Hollywood, got recruited to Planet Hollywood and really understood how a global high growth, high visibility company had to move very quickly and navigate even the best laid plans when things were coming up all the time.
Right.
And then from there, I went to Starbucks, a little more planned out when I left Planet Hollywood. And really, I knew that Planet Hollywood was going through changes and wrote a letter and got some advice from a friend who said, well, what's something that you really love? And I'm like, well, I love Starbucks because I was living on it at the time.
I did not agree with Jill.
And I wrote this crazy kitschy letter about how I was grounded in business and strategy. And, they flew me out to Seattle and said, hey, we need somebody with your mix of on the ground tactics, but the ability to see, growth and strategy because we're doing all these crazy things that we've never tried. And that was back in the day when they weren't really advertising and was all local relationships. And that really set me on my path to sort of corporate strategy. And then from there, I went to Darden restaurants and ran their specialty restaurant grade marketing. And then Spanx, I actually did 2 tours of duty at Spanx.
Right.
I worked for Sarah twice. And it was just an amazing experience.
There's so many experiences that you bring to the table today. What were some of the most defining moments for you with these roles that really helped you determine the path you're on today?
One in particular sticks out. I was working for Darden restaurants, brand new. It was my first director role. I had been in a lot of manager roles and, everyone loved me. I got stuff done all the time. And when I got there, I really was taken under the wing by the then CEO, Gene Lee, who was amazing and mentored me. And I got to spend time with him. And the very first meeting I had, he said, you're going to fail. He goes, I can see by what you've done so far that you're used to getting things done. He said, but the first meeting you have with all the other directors and this really legacy-laden company and people who have MBAs and have gone to Kellogg to come up with these amazing plans. He's like, you're super tactical. And I just want to tell you that because the first time you go into many of these other directors, you need to watch yourself. And he was right. I went to my first director's meeting and came out crying.
Wow.
And it really was a lesson. I always say I got my MBA at Darden, as I was working there, because from that moment on, I did everything I could to learn how to write a business plan, how to write a growth plan, what strategy really was. It was asked not just like, I can do this for you, but here's why. Learning how to read the data and the analytics, learning how to do focus groups and, customer acquisition. I mean, I really spent a lot of time working on that. And it was amazing. And from there, we had some great successes.
Yeah. I love, love, love that you've brought up this topic because I think that, first of all, a lot of CEOs hire marketing directors with CMO roles without strategy background because all the CEO knows from a marketing standpoint is tactics.
Correct.
In other words, they do not position it where it needs to be positioned within the organization. So that, I think, is happening in a lot of situations, and the CMO doesn't recognize yet that they are not strategic. They've just got a title. That's it. I think talk about a life lesson for him to be able to say that to you. But he knew that you had the ability to think strategically, which is why he hired you.
Correct.
So connect the dots for us, if you will, on that hiring moment and what he saw in you that he knew you could get there.
So Darden had this really extensive hiring process for directors and anybody who's going to be on the executive track, because once you were in with them, that was the expectation. You would go into the executive track, and it was a full 3-day immersion process. And they would put you through the ringer. I mean, you sat in an office and worked with other directors and some actors, believe it or not, and they would throw everything at you. And then they would assess and have a 2-day debrief with you and ask questions around why you did certain things that you did. But when I was hired to work for the brands Capital Grille, Eddie V's, and Yard House, it wasn't the billion-dollar ad budgets that I was given, like an Olive Garden and a Longhorn Steak. It was really, what are you going to do to help this growth? And I was able to lay that out for him pretty quickly in my interview. And so he knew that I had the ability to actually articulate a plan and then talk about, here's what I need to get it done.
So it's really interesting because they think growth. Marketers and sales and product have to think scalability to get there, right? So
Correct.
How does a marketing lead take the scalability that is needed and recognize that to get the growth goals that the board and the CEO expect? That's a big question.
That is a great question. And it's like the Holy Grail, right? Because everybody has these great ideas, and particularly living in the digital age, where you can get, hundreds, thousands, even millions of likes sometimes, but it doesn't necessarily translate into sales.
Right.
I'm a big believer and had to learn this about test and learn and then replicate, test and learn and then replicate, and be able to work with your finance partner and say, okay, if I invest a little more, what am I going to get for that?
Yeah, I think it's great. Let's unpack a little bit more about what this might look like in practice. When you think about scalability, what's the difference between growing fast and growing well?
Gosh, growing fast is just that. And, we actually experienced that at Spanx in the early days, literally planting a flag wherever we could, opening up accounts, not only in different geographic regions, but also in different verticals. And so at that time, we would create differentiated product to go into different verticals. So Neiman's was different from a Kohl's, which was different from a Bloomingdale's. We were able to do that really fast. When we got to a $1 billion point where we could say, let's look at the business and what it's doing to the margin, we realized that even though we grew really fast with all of these different product lines, we needed to cut some of them out and to say, how do we now take, unproliferate what we've done with all these, hundreds of SKUs and still continue to move forward?
Right.
So I think you just have to keep your eye on it because everybody wants, particularly with investors, if you have investors or, if you have a different audience, people want you to go really fast. I say speak the numbers and to help you grow well so that you're armed with the information.
Right. What foundational elements do you think brands need before they can really scale and succeed at it?
There has to be some kind of consumer acceptance and some equity in
Yeah.
the brand. So you've got to be able to stick to your tenants. And that's one thing that Sarah did really well. She stuck to her tenants of this is what I'm doing. I'm making, the world look better one bite at a time, basically was, kind of her mantra. And so everything we did from there was, how are we going to stick to our mission statement? And that's, to me, one of the most important things. Because once you get too far off your mission statement, that you're naturally off strategy.
Right. And, I think it takes a strong person to be able to recognize that, back to the tactics.
Mhm.
Early on in your position with Darden, you were so busy getting SHIT done, as we all are, that you have those SHIT minutes,
Yes.
moments rather about, just these epiphanies because you're not looking, at that North Star, at that purpose, whatever it might be, often enough.
Correct. And being able to articulate that is not just being able to recognize it, it's being able to articulate it and kind of map it out and prove it out because you're going to get pushback, particularly when you want to try something new. And if you can connect the dots to this is how it's on strategy, then, you'll get more support behind you and you'll get the resources to be able to do that.
Can you share an example of, where an early strategic choice became a pivotal future growth moment for you?
Yes. I was at Darden. It was Capitol Grill. And we were opening up the Los
Oh my gosh, I love Capitol Grill. One of our favorites. It's our
So I
family.
recommend all of their marketing. And, one thing that the Capitol Grill did really, really well is when you went to the Capitol Grill, if you were in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, or Nashville, Tennessee, or Miami, Florida, you really had no idea that there was another Capitol Grill anywhere else
Yeah.
back in the day, right? They wanted to create this really elevated fine dining experience, and you felt like a local steakhouse. There were wine lockers with, really local pillars of the community. And on the wall was artwork and portraits of pillars.
Cool. Yeah.
So we were opening up the Los Angeles market for the very first time. I'll never forget it. And I was like exhausted. I was going out there all the time. We were opening up the Beverly Center. We had a great partnership with American Express, who was going to allow us to invite people in, who had platinum cards and above. So that was really great. And so I said, what we're going to do? We're going to invite in vloggers. We called them vloggers at the time. And we're going to have a live feed because this is where it is. It's LA. People are talking about this and they're sharing experiences. And I'll never forget, the president of the company goes, social media is never going to work.
Yeah.
It's never going to die. And I was not an expert, by the way. I was not
Yeah.
a social media expert. I just knew this was a conversation that was happening. I was, everyone was sort of watching what was going on. But again, we were the Capitol Grill. We were not Olive Garden. I didn't have a $40 million ad budget to spend.
Yeah.
I had, here's American Express, and they're going to help you invite some people in, figure out a way to talk about it.
Yeah.
So outside of print in really nice magazines, I was a little, I was a little strapped.
Yeah.
So I remember doing it and it was a huge success. And we had lifestyle bloggers come in, and like wellness bloggers come in, which they didn't call them wellness back then. It was like athletic bloggers, I think.
Like, how many years ago was this?
This was 2009.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely bloggers back then.
Yes. Everybody was a blogger. And a lot of them were actually real journalists. They're working for the LA Times. So we had that working for us.
I love it. I recall a time we managed a division of TPC for many, many years called Big O Tires. And we had about 74 stores in the region that we managed. And we started with this brand in the early 2000s and worked with them for 13, 14 years. So there was a lot of digital change during that time. when we started with them, they were in newspaper. And we immediately shifted them to broadcast and radio, knowing that, that train had passed, years ago. But probably 5 years in, maybe 4 years in, we started to talk social media with them. And they said, these are franchise leaders, right?
Yeah.
So they have business savvy, but they're not marketing savvy at all. And they said no. And I repitched it, every quarter, because it was easy to implement. Every quarter I'd repitch it. And it took probably 2 years until they finally said yes. And, the ramp up took longer. But that's a situation where could it have impacted the brand in a bigger way had they said yes? They absolutely could have. So listening, I guess the moral of the story here is, listen to the marketing experts. You went out on a limb, with a very with a very premium brand, and it worked.
Mhm.
And that is where I think more brands just need to be gutsy.
They do. They
Yeah.
do. And it was, I back channeled a lot and enlisted the help of people that I knew would support me. And I was very careful to map it all out. And that was going back to my lesson learned from my mentor, Jean Lee, who was like, put it on paper. Don't just do it. How are you going to measure it? I was never really trained for that. So I had to learn all this.
Yeah.
And, I made my case and they're like, okay.
You know what, Jill, I have to be honest with you. I think that we have to learn along the way. There is not a program in college or even a master's program that isn't super vertical.
Yep.
That teaches the broad aspects of knowledge that high-level marketing leaders need. And I really do believe, I still have Ogilvy on advertising sitting in the bookcase on the other side of this desk. And do you want to know, I refer to it often for some of the most fundamental components, creative development and, emotional epiphanies, those sort of things. And so there's a lot of elements of what we learn that truly does stand the test of time. But it is so fast-paced and so many new technologies coming in each and every moment of every day that we have to stay on top of it in order to stay relative, not only for our own positions and what you and I do each day, but also to make sure that the brands that we work on are relevant.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, with that, high horse, what are some of the early warning signs that a brand's foundation isn't ready for scale?
Sales. Listen, sales, whatever points to sales, if you are in CPG or retail, returns are a really good indicator of that, which, we learned that at Spanx as well. And we're, have to look out for that at the Inactive company. But not only that, but when your consumer conversations start getting diluted, when people don't understand what you're trying to say, when you start getting a little bit of backlash, when you're not clear in what you're doing and people can't connect the dots or engage with you because you're creating a compelling narrative, that is a huge red flag.
Yeah, I agree. Let's take that a step further. Let's talk about how we can evolve brand positioning for growth, a wonderful project that I'm working on right now with a client. How do you guide brands to evolve their positioning as their audience categories shift?
So I like to do an exercise that I call a messaging map and sort of take their, whatever it is, their mission statement, their tagline, their overarching narrative. And then underneath that, we'll map out either a few scenarios, each one of their audiences, and say, okay, take that overall positioning. Now, with the same verbiage, shift it so that you're speaking to this part of the segment audience. Then shift it so that you're speaking to this part of the product. If it doesn't make sense when you start to shift all that, you're getting off strategy.
Got it. Do you recall a moment in time where you were, planning or were having a strategy session with a client or your internal brand position, and you were able to realize right then and there that we're off strategy?
Yeah, a client that I work with right now, they're actually a leadership development company. They offer classes and courses for individuals as well as big companies. They'll come in and do, growth, performance management, and leadership development, taking anybody who's like a new leader or a seasoned leader, taking them from manager to director level, or even, C-level governance. And they were introducing something amazing. It was like this hardcore, extreme outdoor team building exercise, which we could get there eventually, but they really wanted to make that sort of the cornerstone of their new campaign. And it was such a leap to get there from this very polished, almost academic approach that they had been taken, that I had to show them, like, you're going to come out with this new campaign when people are expecting you to educate them on how to get to the next level from a leadership perspective, and be like, let's go, on a ropes course. And it's really hard to connect the dots. So we ended up sort of elongating their timeline and taking a few steps in between to show how that could be one of the offerings in sort of leadership development. And that would be like, collaboration and teamwork, rather than we're going to go climb a mountain.
Is there, well, I don't want this to be a loaded question, but
Okay.
how can leaders recognize when it's time for the brand's story to evolve? It's hard.
It is hard. So I'll give you, this is a great story that Sarah tells from Spanx. And we just this was the second time I worked for Sarah. I'd come back. I'd moved. So I had gone to work for Starbucks and Darden, and then I moved back to Atlanta, and happily she wanted me to come back.
Right.
And I remember her telling this story and us sitting around the table and being like, we need to shift and offer new products. She was speaking at a college. People love to hear Sarah speak. She's amazing. And so in that particular moment, the young women on campus came up to her like, oh my gosh, I've been dying to meet you. And my mom loves your products.
Oh my gosh. Amazing.
And, so I've been on this journey with her for almost 15 years. I'm like, they're telling us something. Like, what the young women today have a completely different set of values than us being, be skinny or die, or, it's different. They want comfort. They want seamless. They want color. They want activewear, rather than just a really impressive girdle.
Right. Oh my gosh. And what did that lead to?
It led to the inactivewear. Now it is beautiful today. But that was the genesis of inactivewear, and the jeans and the pants collection that Spanx does. That was the genesis for all of that.
Yeah. So a younger market that may not need everything to, move around and fit. I love it. So this is interesting. When expanding globally into new verticals and markets, what elements of the brand's identity must stay constant?
I think you have to go back to the tenet and the mission statement, like I said earlier. Are you delivering what you set out to do? It does get tricky. So, I remember this, and sort of expanding really quickly into different countries. Not everything we were saying was translating really well. And we had to get help with that, from a on the ground perspective. We started to enlist translators, distributors, third party, other marketing agencies and PR agencies who could help us out. But as long as you can still articulate what the product's supposed to do and how it's supposed to make you feel, you can adjust the language and the creative around it.
Yeah, I love it. Let's dive into leadership and the mechanics of scaling, which I think is very important here, because we've all got a lot of great ideas, but if you can't get it implemented, then all is lost. What leadership qualities make a brand truly ready to scale?
I think you have to be willing to listen. I know that sounds kind of kitschy or, overdone, but if you're not listening or paying attention to what the successes are and why those successes are happening, and you keep, so many leaders, and I've been guilty of it myself, just continue to move quickly, kind of ask your team to do more because they seem to be able to handle it and people, won't say no. And that's when you can get yourself into trouble. And
Right.
Starbucks, when I was there in 99, and our mantra was 2000 by 2000. So we were looking to open 2000 doors and we were opening a store a day across
Wow.
the country. And I was in the Chicago market at the time. And we got to a point where we really could not, like our teams were just overburdened and we started to miss the mark on some of the construction deadlines and some of the product deadlines. And we couldn't even get enough product in the stores, to be able to sell
Wow.
anything. And that's when we knew. And we started, communicating back up the chain. Now, Starbucks is a best in class, executive team, and they were willing to listen and adjust that. But there was a point where we just had to do more because we had to make deadlines. We couldn't do it. But then planning for the next round of store openings, we were able to adjust that and say, what do we really need? Like bandwidth's a real thing.
Well, how did you create that alignment then?
I mean, we had to communicate what the urgent situation is. Like, we're going to miss, there's going to be a much bigger problem if we can't deliver the sales that go along with opening these stores, if we can't get the doors open.
And the bigger issue is, you had the C-suite discussion. The bigger issue is that, the 20,000 people, 30, 40, 50,000, underneath
Correct.
that are, feeling the pain of, I'm sorry, we're out of vanilla syrup today.
Right.
How did you reinstill with those team members, with the market leaders, with the store managers, that this growth is not going to affect you?
It was a lot. And one of the things that Starbucks did really well, and they still do really well today, is internal communication.
Yeah.
There's nothing that happens there and that everybody doesn't know about. And so we were constantly communicating, recommunicating. Back then it was a lot of phone calls and some faxes still. But making sure that they all had all of the, and it wasn't just the information, it was also a lot of contingency. So if your store is this kind of store and situation A happens, this is what you do. And it was probably over communicating at the time. When I look back on it now, I don't think anybody would do that anymore.
I think there's an interesting topic around brand readiness. And Starbucks, there was and still continues to be such an affinity and, quite frankly, almost a cult-like need for the product once or twice a day, dare I say. And the awareness was so high with not a ton of advertising, by the way. They had great ad budgets, but it wasn't like they were advertising like a normal Macy's or retail giant would. It's like they just didn't need to. So what do you look for from a brand readiness standpoint when you're scaling, or if you're ready to scale, rather?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer in the hub and spoke approach. So, we're experiencing that right now with the Inactive company. And that's what we try to do with Spanx in the early days: master your market, your vertical, your consumer base, your consumer segment, and then start to work on adjacencies, whether it's adjacent markets or a similar geographic area or a similar vertical. I'm a very big believer in that. I mean, it's really hard if you are a South Florida favorite, to all of a sudden then become like a Minnesota favorite. It's just a different approach to not only marketing in the area, but also setting yourself up. There are distribution factors to take into consideration. There are, local laws to take into consideration. So I personally, I'm a fan of the hub and spoke approach.
Yeah, I love it too. Thanks for the reminder.
Now, do I always do it? No, because everybody likes to be opportunistic.
I know.
The world is so much smaller. However,
I know. It's a true thing. It's like we've got so much at our fingertips and we need to remind ourselves about it. What patterns do you see among brands that scale successfully, and what do they have in common?
I think they have this craveability, right? So, and not just food, like look at Lululemon, it's this craveable, replicable, I can count on you. Like,
Yeah.
deliver on what their brand promise is. I'm going to give you really, quality clothing that you can do whatever it is you want to do in,
Right.
right? And you can count on us for whatever it is that we're advertising online.
And as a very astute marketer, how would you translate craveability to an aerospace company who's engineering a new solar sail for space, or a foundry who is making some of the most important parts that make machines run across the country?
So it doesn't really matter. I mean, whoever your audience is, show them through your marketing materials or your sales materials or even through one-on-one. Here's what's going to happen. This is what you can count on us for, and prove out to them that they can do that. And then either they're going to come back or they're going to try you for the first time.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely love that. Okay, single most biggest lesson that you can share with marketers today. And
So
from what company?
yeah. So I will say I lecture to the I'm also a University of Georgia grad. Go Dogs. So I lecture there once a quarter, and inevitably they ask the same question. Like, and here's what I always say, and this may sound oversimplified. Before you get any really fancy job or internship, go get a job that requires you to be in service of or collaborate with others. I don't care what you do. Go work in a restaurant, work in a clothing store, work in a hotel, and see how people are reacting to the products and the services, because that's what I did. I think that's how I actually got a leg up, because I did not have a traditional marketing education or background, but because I saw firsthand how people were responding to the marketing and what they were doing with the product and what it took to make that work on the ground level. It really helped me when I was sitting in my ivory tower making these decisions for people across the country.
Yeah. Well, it helps us understand behaviors in a bigger way, right? And I think that gets pushed aside quite often. I mean, there's this mindset that we're going to make customers believe in us because we're going to tell them why they should believe in us, instead of really understanding what behavior it takes for them to make the decision to believe in you, hence the right messaging to help them get there. I mean, it's just, they try to shove it down their throats.
Well, and it also enables you to have that conversation at multiple levels. So
Yeah.
while you're trying to manage up and selling your big ideas, you're also going to be responsible for managing down and making sure it's executed. If you've never done it yourself,
Right.
there's no way you're going to be able to help anybody else sell it to a customer.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Incredible conversation. We're at our final question for the year, and one of our final interviews for the year that we're talking about this, which is our Better At series that we started in January with our first show. And the reason we started this is we as marketing leaders, I believe, are always trying to get better at something to help us learn more, to help us stay relative, whatever it might be. So what is one thing that you've learned to be better at that's created a measurable difference in how you lead, work, and really show up in your role?
I've learned to be better at analytics,
Mm.
right? I mean, and not analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
But I will leave you with this one story that's such a great story from my Dunkin' Donuts days.
I love it.
I was running the South Florida market. It was my first like really meaty DMA job working with 100% franchisees. And so I had to sell to them like all of these new initiatives. One was iced coffee and one was the apple donut.
Mm-hmm.
And, in South Florida, apple is not the fruit of choice. But I had done this whole analysis. I had gone up to Boston and gotten all this information. And literally the day before, I went into the store and said, I know the apple donut, like I have all this data to show this, but I was watching the front person at the counter, and every time a donut came up, they would push apple because it was the first donut on the touch screen.
Oh, interesting.
And I said, wait a minute, hold on. We're not actually selling all those apple donuts, are we? And she's like, no, it's just easiest. I just press that.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so what was the conversation you had not only, on a local level. But what data did you bring back then to corporate that allowed you?
Well, so I called my boss. I'm like, hey, so we have a little bit of a interesting situation here that I suspect is happening in other markets too. So I think we need to, just sort of reevaluate.
I love it.
What was going to be like a full-blown launch and we were going to double down and make it a year-round favorite, we ended up making a seasonal item, and it worked out really well.
Oh my gosh, that could have been an absolute horrible
Oh,
situation.
yeah, and I was ready to hang my hat on it. I'm like, this is amazing. Apples. Who doesn't like apples?
Oh my goodness. I love that. That's amazing. And you know what? You've been so amazing today. Thank you, Jill, for your incredible insights. What an enjoyable conversation. What is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
They can actually reach me at jill@jmacraegroup.com. That would be JMACRAE group.com.
That is fantastic. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, the best way is actually LinkedIn, and that is Lori Sartorius Jones. Thank you, Jill. You've been incredible today. I really appreciate your wisdom, and your insights. Hey, there's a new ad word.
New phrase. That's right. We own it. ISDOM.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Anyways, thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.